Okay, we're here.
We're just waiting for the feed to catch up, but I think we're gonna be good at this. Yes, ma'am. I think you're good.
Okay. It is 9:02 a.m. and sorry, the TBVME is now in session. Can I get a full board call to order, roll call? Dr. Kreiner.
Jessica Quillivan,
Here.
Keith Pardue,
Here.
Sandra Lynn Kreiner here, Samantha Mixon,
Here.
Michael White,
Here.
Randy Skaggs,
Good morning.
Sue Allen,
Here.
Victoria Whitehead,
Present.
all accounted for.
Thank you, ma'am. FYI to the rest of the board members, we were kind of quickly and surprisingly got a new public member, but she has not gone through her board training as of yet. She's over here in Houston in our neck of the woods, and we're glad to have her. So hopefully we'll be meeting her next board meeting, but we do have a full board again. So just wanted to let y'all know. Agenda item 2, consideration and approval of the minutes. Were there any corrections or changes that needed to happen there?
I don't know that I have a correction, but I do have a question.
Okay.
And it is in reference to the rule change for CE.
Me too. I had a question. Go ahead.
Okay, so we in the minutes, it states that we chose option 1 and we removed the distinction between in-person and virtual so that you could get all your hours virtually. But that distinction is not explicit. Like we didn't actually write something in there. And so do we need a rewrite for this, or is this just something we're going to say we just understand it? Because I think when new board members come on board and they read this rule, it's going to be confusing and we won't, we're going to have issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was confused by that. I didn't know that option 1 was what we voted for. It says that you could still have to get some in person. So Brittany, I don't remember. Maybe is that the one we.
Per our discussion of that rule, the board elected to remove any requirements about the format of how licensees were to receive their CE. So whether that be in person or virtual. So that's what we did. Is it's an agnostic rule between the format. So there's no prohibition on how many hours you have to get in person versus virtual.
Right, but it's not clear if the rule stays written that way because it does have in there a part where it says you still need to have like 2 hours in person.
Yeah.
One of them said 2 and one of them said 5. So I think we need to fix it before it's published. Because even though we agreed to it, that's not the way it reads.
So there might be an issue in the minutes and the materials, but that rule has been published and is available for comment in that format where it removes that distinction.
Okay, so this was what we discussed, but the final rule is not in our minutes. And we didn't see the published copy, or?
No, so the process is that you all vote to propose a rule. So we voted to propose that rule at the last meeting, and it has now been published with the register, allowing for public comments to then later be adopted by the board at a subsequent meeting.
But wouldn't it be adopted in this meeting?
Yeah.
It was done in the last meeting?
It unfortunately hasn't, due to some publication deadlines, it was not published on the register for 30 days at the time of this meeting. So it will be for adoption at the next meeting.
But it's this option 1 that's written the way this is, or no, you're saying that's a separate thing altogether. These were the options given and we made a new rule, but that's not in our minutes. Or are you telling me this option 1 is what we posted for comment?
Option one is confusing to me. If I read D, notwithstanding the allowable hours provided, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it still
least
requires
7
in
hours.
person.
Yeah, if I read that, I think, well, I gotta have 7 hours in person.
Yeah, I don't remember these being, maybe we made our own after looking at these two options that were presented, but then I would like to see that in the minutes.
Mhm.
Yes, so it looks like the incorrect version of the rule made it into the minutes. So what we proposed is correct and is what has been published. What is currently in the minutes is the incorrect version of the rule.
Okay, so what we have published currently is not either of these. So the minutes need to be amended to, as far as option number one, I guess, needs to be what we corrected it to, or we need to enter into these minutes what we corrected it to would be the correction, correct?
Correct.
And do you have that in front of you just for funsies? Can you read that, what we published to the Texas Register back to us?
I don't, but I can pull it up very quickly.
And thank you, Lynn, for bringing that up, because I was thinking I must be nuts or didn't know what happened in the last board meeting or what happened.
Right, no, and C, it says you need a participatory programs. Interactive and participatory programs shall not exceed 10 hours. I don't understand what that is. Is that like doing like it?
No, I think these are just all not correct. I'd like to hear our
Right,
rule and be happy with
right.
it.
And then it says 7 hours must be obtained from personal attendance
Yeah,
at
those are,
live courses.
Yeah.
And that was, we're like, look, we've been doing this for over a year now. It shouldn't be an issue. We get almost all our CE online if you want it, but we can still go to meetings if you choose.
right.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think we'll get it. I think we'll get there.
Yeah.
Misprint, and I should have told Brittany and Patricia that earlier, but sorry, guys.
So it looks like part of the issue is that the way that the rule is published is not necessarily translating into the PDF copy, and that's the issue. So the problem is we are deleting the C and D portions of the requirements from each. And then the way that it gets published in the register is you put brackets around the portions that you're deleting. So, and it just looks like that formatting's not showing up in our PDF, so we can fix that going forward.
Okay.
So if you look under veterinary licenses, so B, distribution of continuing education hours, subsection 1 is veterinary licenses. We essentially are just deleting C and D from those provisions. So there's no restriction or requirement on the format. And then that follows down for 2 equine dental provider licenses. We've deleted subsection C and D of that rule. And then for rule section 3, licensed veterinary technician.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking we made it a much shorter rule, and okay, yeah. So that's
So
it just went away. C, D, and E. Okay.
The formatting that the register requires just isn't showing up in that PDF.
As far as the cutouts.
Mhm.
So CD and on the LVT, C, D, and E is going away and all that. Okay. That makes it more.
So that is the version that is currently published in the register and open for public comment that will be eligible for adoption at our next board meeting.
Okay. And just to be clear, and I don't want to skip around, we're still not requiring at this time CE hours, or are we? We're not.
We are not. No, we are still under the governor's emergency declaration. So that waiver of CE will continue until that is lifted.
Okay. All right.
Okay, any other comments on the minutes? Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as discussed?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Right, item number 3, Mr. Hellenberg, Executive Director's Report, please.
Morning, everyone. For the executive director's report, we're going to touch on the new data system. Since our last meeting, we did get a soft launch of that system up in March. The purpose of that launch was so that licensees could trickle onto the system, start reporting any problems that they encountered, and that we could make the changes or adjustments as needed. Since we launched that, we have about 150 licensees created accounts that are active in the system. There's two technical issues that we're dealing with. We've had about 15 records so far reported to us that was showing a false positive on disciplinary action. And this happened because of the manner in which the old data was housed, and when it got transferred over, there were some matching issues. So we've had 15 records that inadvertently showed disciplinary action that had about 5 records that showed a status other than active when they were supposed to be active. So we've corrected those. And so those are the two technical adjustments that we found since the system launched live. Texas.gov did approve the payment portal and the application. However, they haven't given authorization to activate the payment portal. And so the vendor has sent Texas.gov all of the legal technical wording for the screens to ensure compliance with the PCI personal information data. As soon as Texas.gov gives the thumbs up to that, then the actual payment portal will be live. Currently, licensees are still renewing their licenses in the older online system that continues to function on that. The public verify link, which was published some time ago, I put the link in the report and gave a screenshot of what that looks like if you haven't had the opportunity to visit that. But I would recommend that you visit that and search some folks to see how that works. Another outstanding issue on that, the vendor is still working on uploading the hard copies of the disciplinary action to the system. As you know, those were kept in a PDF format, and they were not kept in any kind of naming convention that was easy to import. So the vendor is working on manually entering those older PDFs, loading the new PDFs in there. So new orders are searchable. So when you go to the public verify, you search a licensee, it says that they have disciplinary action, then below that they'll get a link to the actual PDF document so that they can see the discipline, and they don't have to file an open records request for it. Currently, those older records say that if it says disciplinary action, there's a part there about just make an open records request for that, and we'll comply with that. The next item is our legislative bills that are sitting in legislative session. When we met in February, we had 2 bills. Now we have quite a few, 12, I think to be exact, that were filed that somewhat affect the veterinary profession. So those are listed with their current statuses on that. The one that is of the most importance to us is the sunset bill. The Senate bill is the one that took the lead between the House and the Senate bill on our sunset bill. And so the Senate bill 713 is filed by Senator Buckingham, and that is the one that extends the board through September 1 of 2029. So good news on that front. Next, we have our agency operations section with our fiscal information. You'll notice that as we've talked from the beginning of this fiscal year, because of the way we entered the data systems payments onto our budget, that it front loaded some of our budget. And so our spend down has been a little higher than our expended rate. Last report, it was 3%. It was 3% difference. This report, it's a 1% difference going into the final quarter. So we're going to be pretty close coming in to the bottom of the fiscal year. And keep in mind that this takes into account the fact that the state reduced our budget by 5% due to the COVID-related response. So we took a 5% reduction in our budget. However, our revenues are strong. We're going to be somewhere around 750 to 800,000 over in revenues. That's before the 5% was taken out of our budget. So you can put another 5% on top of that that's going back to general revenue from the agency, despite their cuts to us. The next you'll see, yes, questions? Nope. Okay. The next you'll see our licensing report is that's the fiscal year wrap up. So we've had about 6,000 renewals on veterinarians, 1,200 on LVTs, and 33 on EDPs. Active counts as of yesterday was 9,072 active DVMs, 1,945 LVTs, and 55 EDPs. Our enforcement numbers are the next. As you remember, COVID hit our enforcement division pretty hard. We were down an enforcement investigator for about 6 months. That investigator is back to work on somewhat of a limited duty, but he is back to work. And then we have another investigator that's been out on medical related issues as well. So we've been down 2 investigators most of the fiscal year. However, the investigators have made significant progress reducing our number of cases. On our last report, we reported that we had about 70 FY20 cases. That's down to 45. So we've worked hard to clearing up those. And then our 19 cases have reduced as well. And I'm told that another 6 will come off of that this month. So despite the shortages in our enforcement division, they are clearing cases rapidly. What that is at the sacrifice of is inspections. So we haven't had any inspections because we're still on a travel restriction. However, the cases are doing quite well as a result of the lack of inspections.
Quick question.
Next, yeah, go ahead.
37 new complaints this last month. In my head, I felt like we were getting 30. Like in my head, the last number I have that we average is 30. So that is 37 been consistent since our last board meeting? Are we closer to 40 now a month, or is that a weird month or what? Oh, there you are.
We had 50. In the last report, we had 50. This one, we had 30. We have been averaging around 30 to 35. The COVID, we saw a dip during COVID in complaints. We didn't receive that many complaints in. However, it's made up for that since then. So I'm not sure that we can say yet that there's a trend and uptick and we need to move our 35 average up because they've been kind of all over the place in the last year.
I was just curious. Okay, thank you.
And then in our legal division, we have 341 cases sitting in legal. Of those, 144 are pending ICs. Kudos to the board members who sit on the ICs panel. They are working diligently to hammer out those ICs and get them scheduled for board action. And then we've got about 70 orders that you'll be seeing today that will help clear that up. Lastly, you have a wrap up of the licensees issued since our last meeting. And that is all I have for the executive director's report pending any questions you have.
So I have a question, and it's more of a comment. And I don't know if it's not appropriate to bring it up here, just let me know. But I was thinking, the executive director reports on what everyone in the agency is doing. And I was thinking that maybe once a year, I don't know, beginning of the year, end of the year, instead of the executive director presenting everybody else's stuff, maybe we could see the rest of the staff in at least one board meeting a year so that they can tell us what they're doing and that we can at least offer some active appreciation of the hard work that we know all of them are doing. And I don't know if that is something that we want to, bring up here or not. And we know that you are doing an amazing job, but I think some of the people that are, down in the bowels of the agency that don't get the kudos that they need all the time, I think we should at least be able to see who they are. And especially since we're virtual and we don't get to come up to Austin to visit.
Yeah, that is not a problem. We can coordinate that for a board meeting to have the entire staff on.
Okay, and it's not like they need to stay on the whole time, but just so that they know that we appreciate them for all the work that they're doing for us.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to add one comment observation. I'm very thankful for your work this legislative session. But I think clearly from some of the bills and the testimony that we as a board need to do a better job of telling our story and telling the reality of the inner workings of what we do. I've only been involved in ICs for about 10 months now, but that in particular is something that what I'm hearing is not what's going on. So I would just encourage us, particularly the vets on the board, to be a little more vocal about what we do and what that process looks like and what the realities for us look like. I'm very proud of the work we've done, but just something that we should probably prioritize.
Yeah, and I'll just echo that is correct. There is a lot more power comes from hearing from the veterinarians on the board as opposed to staff when it comes to legislative session.
So I guess I was confused because I'm fairly vocal, and I like to be involved in things like that, but I was told to not speak up or do anything politically related at all when I entered the board, because I would happily do more, but I was told that as a board member, it was inappropriate. Is that not correct?
Yeah, so it comes down to whether or not you're going as an individual person, as a licensee, as a veterinarian professional, or as a board member. And so we cannot pay for your travel, and you can't attend or you can't lobby the legislature, paid for by any way from the board. However, you as a licensee, you as a veterinary professional are free to, comment on anything that you would like to comment on.
So
Well,
Victoria,
there's a difference in telling.
Can you give me specifics, Victoria, on what you're wanting? Because I'm happy to help with that. I agree with you. I think that there's very little understanding of how hard the veterinarians on the board work on the veterinary industry and on behalf of the public. But what exactly would you want to see on that?
I think it's really just more telling the story. And again, I echo John's comments. We are not allowed to lobby the legislature or push for or against something. But if there's bills going through that affect the agency, we can tell our story and what that reality looks like. How much work goes into an IC, what the various steps are. When it comes to a medical review IC and the work that goes into that, what all parties have at various points during the IC to talk about fairness or public transparency or, process. things like that. And, whether it's talking with colleagues or legislators, I think just making sure they know from our experience what that reality looks like. Personally giving up 9 days of work to do these things to help ensure the public is protected. And I'm just the one that sits on the board. I don't do the medical reviews and how long that takes and what that looks like. So I think it's really just telling our story to our various audiences and recognizing that the audiences do include legislators, their staff, but also our fellow associates in the industry, and those that we work with.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, Miss Whitehead. I think I'm sitting here listening to the conversation and I'm actually getting emotional about it, but I do think our board, more than me, our medical reviewers especially, put our board, I think probably, I don't know, there's a lot of other boards out there, but our board members physically and mentally do a lot more work than I think most Texas boards do. Our medical reviewers have full-time DVM jobs and are trying to review 30 plus cases a month, potentially, if they come through medical review. Veterinarians are also a breed who usually don't want to toot their own horn. Like, I don't want to go in front of legislators and say, hey, we're working our ass off over here, but we effing are. Excuse my language in public, but this is, you are right. But, this is not something that I would feel comfortable saying we're working too hard over here, because I don't really believe in that. But I do appreciate all of you. Dr. White is kicking out a ton of medical reviews, and I know you are working probably, and when I say full-time for a veterinarian, that's not 40 hours a week, that's 60, 70 hours a week for veterinarians. That's our full-time in general. Lynn, has her own practice. Mixon has her own practice. All of our medical reviewers, Skaggs has his own practice. And Skaggs, are you a solo practitioner or do you have help sometimes? I don't even know, but everyone is on this board is busting their butt, and I'm super proud of what we're able to do. And I know we're still behind, which is super frustrating, but thanks for bringing that up, Ms. Whitehead.
Yeah, it's very difficult when we go to talking about these cases because there's so much involved in it. And, me as a veterinarian, you sit and look at them for hours and hours and think, well, what would I do and what would they, should do? And there's never a black and white answer. It's always gray. So it makes us, not only it's an emotional toll of trying to figure out, what is right, but I agree. I appreciate that we need to step out and maybe do some vocalization, but I'm proud of the work we do.
I never knew how time consuming it was going to be when I got on this board.
Yeah, I know. Now you're stuck. Don't get out. You can't leave. I'm holding y'all in. No, I can't do that. I appreciate all of y'all. Okay, let's move on. Thank you. Sorry. Are we done with the executive director's report? Was that all part of that? Okay, agenda item 4, discussion, recommendation, and possible action regarding proposed rule changes to be published in the Texas Register. Ms. Sharkey.
Thank you, Dr. Quillivan. So I'll go ahead and talk about the license surrender and the rules committee potential rule changes. And then I know Dr. Quillivan, you submitted the language for the record keeping in cooperation with the board. So I'll talk about my rules and then I'll hand it over to you if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. So the first rule you have is 571.62, which would be a new rule. This would create a process for the board to accept the surrender of a license in lieu of further investigation and discipline. So in this language from this rule echoes the language in the medical board's rules around the same function that the question has arisen if somebody is presented with if they are under investigation and possible discipline, if they can just surrender their license and in an effort to save agency resources, we'd like to offer the licensees that option. Our most severe penalty is revocation, and this is akin to that. So you're getting the most stringent penalty we can award in a much quicker time frame. I will say I had a conversation with Ms. Whitehead, and we are exploring an amendment based on some current case law that's coming out, where we're probably a little bit out of line constitutionally to permanently deny someone without an opportunity for redress. So I would propose that we do amend this to allow surrendered licenses to at least petition the board for reinstatement after 5 years. And that echoes our language with reinstatement.
I just brought that up with Brittany because I think licensing is also a property right in Texas, and people work very hard for their licenses, and understanding that there might be various stages where someone is licensed in their life, maybe in their 20s, 30s, they did something bad, they want to get rid of a certain license, but then in their 30s, change, do the education, do a different license. And because we manage multiple different licenses, I'd like to provide a little bit more flexibility in this rule to allow a petitioner for a license to come back without such direct language that says, nope, no option at all. So to the ability for us to say in certain cases, that's justified. But while still having some sort, in 5 or 10 years open to any type of length there, if you surrender your license, you can't repetition it for X amount of years. But providing a little bit more flexibility there.
What about fines that might have been assessed at the time that their license or at the time of the investigation? So they forego paying any fees, yet they can come back in 5 years and get their license again without ever having paid fees other than licensing fee. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, they would have the opportunity to petition the board for reinstatement. So it's not a guarantee that they would get their license back. You know, I think it would have to be a pretty compelling showing, and that would be left up to the discretion of the licensing committee at that time if they feel comfortable and confident to reinstate that license.
But is there any way of wording that? You know, my concern is, you know, I do something horrible. I cut off the wrong leg, and, you know, and I'm on drugs and whatever, you know, due to that. And then in 5 years, I've kind of turned my life around. But that's not fair to the person who sticks it out and says, okay, I've been investigated. I admit my fault now. I'm going to pay this fine. I'm going to have the ding on my license. I mean, how do we keep that, you know, one guy getting more punished basically for not surrendering his license, you know, and keep it intact? You know what I'm saying?
Sure. And I think a license surrender and inability to practice, especially for you all, you know, as DVMs, you've gone through years of school, testing, building a practice, you know, to not be able to practice for 5 years is a pretty significant punishment. I mean, it's akin to revocation, which is our most severe punishment. And our revocation provision in our rules does allow for petition of the board within after 5 years have passed for reinstatement.
Is there a way, though, to put in there that if you do come back in 5 years, this is the fine you would have been assessed at this point, and in order to get your license back, you have to pay that fine as well?
So that would be at the discretion of the licensing committee. So when we do go in front, when a licensee applicant goes in front of the licensing committee, use their various recommendations and conditions on their licensure. So that, I mean, that could be left to the discretion of the licensing committee.
I honestly think it should be more than 5 years. I think it should be probably 10. To me, there's a difference in revocation versus a voluntary surrender. And revocation, like, we already have that in existence and it's fine, but voluntary surrender, I mean, it needs to be a good amount of time. I completely agree with you, Dr. Skaggs, that, you know, 10 years or so, but we have the ability, I think, in this to really put in those parameters to provide that that differential level of retribution, I guess you could say. Not retribution, that's not the right word, but to ensure that the public is also protected in those situations too.
And
So
Just-
what kind of actions would we want to even consider encouraging someone to do that? I mean, drug use, alcoholism,
so this,
criminal
so this-
activity. What if it's, what if they have a mental breakdown, because they didn't know they were bipolar? And, I'm concerned that we might push for that with someone that's really not stable enough to make that decision until further down the road. And, it gives us an option, but I would really hate for it to be used very much. I guess it's nice to have it there, but that's not something that I would want to pull out of my hat very often. So it would have to be something really serious. And maybe if we're going to have that in there, we also need to have language in there that addresses what level of seriousness that this rule would apply to, not just someone who's kind of scared and doesn't know what else to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and this came about because of two cases that I've been involved in since I've been here that were extremely painful to sit through. Both of those were cognitive decline folks that, because of their declining mental status, they had complaints on them that it was obvious that it was because of their health. And the board was, in one case, forced to take disciplinary action because it was the only way to, there was the only option that we had at the time. And those were extremely painful to sit through and watch, honorable because of their decline. There was no way to clear the case other than disciplinary action. So that's where these two came from. It was specifically looking at the mental health.
And I agree, this is not something that's going to get used a lot. This is not something that's an option versus discipline. I mean, the normal thing we go through is going to be discipline. I mean, and imagine someone who hasn't practiced for 5 years, unless all they've been doing is going to CE for 5 years or even 10 years. That person's probably not fit to practice either if they haven't been practicing coming back. So I think this is, I agree, if it's normal for, as far as legal wise, if Ms. Sharkey and Ms. Whitehead think there should be some little addition to it saying, they can repetition, that's fine. I mean, even people in PRN at sometimes have to repetition or do things like that. But this is probably, more meant to be a permanent, as John stated, for some of those cases, because those are really hard and those are difficult to do, because these are veterinarians who have had a license for a very long time and been in good standing for a very long time and just made some falters at the end there. And it's hard to put that on someone's record who's had a, wonderful career for all that long. So I remember the cases that kind of, and if other medical boards have this, I think we should as well. So does it need to be rewritten, or do you need to propose, are you going to re-propose the rule to us at another meeting, or do you want to add changes now that we can approve to post it, or what?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Since we are going to be forming, I'm hoping at this board meeting, an actual rules committee with probably 3 individuals, would it be prudent, since this has obviously generated a lot of good questions and debate, to maybe not publish the changes in the rules until the committee has had a chance to sort of flesh this out and have these debates among the 3 of them and then present some of these answers? Because this is a very valuable debate that is happening.
I agree. Are we supposed to do a rules committee this meeting?
I don't know. I think so.
That is that's my next rule to talk about.
Thank you, Brittany.
I think that's a great idea, Dr. Mixon.
I think everybody's comment has been erudite, it's valuable, it's pertinent, it's timely. And I don't want to rush into something like this without a rules committee having sort of an internal debate and then presenting sort of options to the board.
Sure, absolutely. Happy to hold it for you all and re-propose at a later board meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
So would that be for the other two rules as well that have been proposed for amending? Or
Well, the
look
the
at those as well?
VCR and the
make
duty
the
to
same
cooperate
answer?
was something we discussed last meeting, and we made an ad hoc committee that has reviewed these rules, so that we will be presenting those, but yeah, those have been reviewed.
Right. So we will hold that rule pending further discussion at our next board meeting with
Okay.
input from the Rules Committee, which is actually the next rule on our on the table for today. So at our last meeting, we did propose an ad hoc Rules Committee to put together the necessary language to actually constitute the Rules Committee and put that into our rules. So it's an amendment to Rule 575.5. It calls for 2 veterinarian members, 1 public member, and echoes a lot of the same formation. So a lot of the same formation as our other standing committees on the board.
Any discussion regarding that rule? Any questions? Can I get a motion to approve the, or yeah, is that, can I get a motion
Motion.
on
Second.
577.5?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Great, we'll get that proposed and have it hopefully up for adoption at the next board meeting.
But currently our ad hoc committee is in function, is that correct? Okay. Okay, so I know last board meeting we had a lot of lists of lots of rules that we wanted to be reviewed, but 2 of these seemed to be most important, especially as we were going through cases. So one that Dr. Skaggs brought to our attention in the last board meeting wanted it to be more clear, but also pending the new rule, if we want, once we edit and have a final new record keeping rule, we want to use it to educate our licensees regarding it. So there aren't a lot of changes. I think you can see the edits to make it a little more clear, but I feel like the rule is pretty complete. There's a lot of, how long we have to keep records and the basic stuff of what we need to keep in the records. Because some of the red is actually some things I've added on to the rule, because we do talk about these things in informal conferences. And we know that a lot of patient deaths are in the pre and post-operative period. So if we're seeing a lot of cases like that, it seems like we're interested in those things when those come to IC. But all the rest of the rule, I really left pretty much the same. A lot of it is just, how things get done. So questions, comments regarding Rule 573.52.
I do have a question on the number 12, documentation of pre and post operative care. What exactly are you wanting or expecting there?
Well, certainly we already have exams. So, you may know as well as I do that we see cases that go to surgery that don't even have a pre-exam record.
I see a bunch of them that don't even say what they did.
I know. Well, exactly. So surgical procedure.
On post-operative though, I'm just trying to get clear. Are we saying, do you want to know when the tube was removed, or
no.
That much detail?
No, or else I would have to state that probably, but I want to know, mainly it's monitoring, right? What's happening between pre-med and when the pet is up walking around, is someone even looking at the animal?
Okay.
It's off the table and extubated, so.
I totally agree with you. I just want to make sure I understand what we're expecting.
I don't know if it should be worded differently to be more clear, Dr. White. I don't know. To me, pre and post-operative care is a thing, and maybe people don't know what that is, but I think our licensees should know what that is. But if you have a recommendation for wording it differently, I certainly can.
I think it's good to leave it as, I think it's good. Our colleagues are very well educated, and I think it's good to leave it. I like the fact that you put in the extra words, because the whole point was we were trying to help licensees understand the medical records rule better. So you add enough language that it gives them some more guidance, but I'd like to leave it a little bit general, because pre and post-operative care on a horse castration is going to be vastly different than pre and post-op care on a cat, OHE in a hospital. So, and I think you can easily note those things, even on a horse, induced with these drugs, horse laid down at this time, performed the procedure, horse stood at this time, was in full recovery and could walk at this time. You can leave it vague and do more of a rural animal assessment. Yeah. Don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm concerned, when I first brought this up, I feel like our record keeping is just way too much, compared to our colleagues. As I said before, you go to your doctor for tonsillitis, you see your records that he has written on you, and it says tonsillitis, RX, Amoxi, 500 milligrams every 12 hours. They don't feel like they have to give a dissertation on tonsillitis or how to do a spay. You do a spay, in my mind, you shouldn't have to describe a spay procedure in every time you do a spay, unless there's something unusual about it. You shouldn't have to say, I've done this and this and this and this, when it's the same thing every time, and every veterinarian in the state of Texas has been taught that's the way you do a spay. I don't know. I just feel like we're overwhelming our veterinarians, because not only do we have to tell what we're giving and how much we're giving, we have to tell where we're giving it. We have to tell all kinds of different things, and sometimes if you read the records, you have to even document, I didn't refer this tonsillitis to a specialist because I feel like I can handle it. It's just immense, and my problem is, and I've heard from veterinarians since we started talking about this, is if we do the paperwork like it's written now, you can see maybe 3 patients a day. And especially in a rural practice where you go out to lunch and someone asks you about their pet, you say, oh, probably do this and this and this. Well, you come back and you've got to try to document all that in the paperwork, and I don't. And honestly, if I'm not doing it and I don't feel like it, I just feel like we're putting too much burden on our veterinarians. That's why I was hoping we could have maybe the rules committee to look at these things, streamline them a little bit. And I realize that, these rule changes, 99.99% of the time, your records are fine. And there's only 0.01% of the time that it becomes a problem. And that's an informal conference that you needed more information. But, I just feel like we need a happy medium. We've got so much paperwork now between controlled drug records, checking prescriptions, everything. You spend all day doing paperwork, and I don't really know that it's fair, especially when our colleagues in other professions, fill a cavity, gave a shot of lidocaine, that's it. So that's what was my goal in talking about all this. And in my mind, reading these rules, it seems like we've gone further in the other direction of making it more difficult to do records rather than less. And that's what I'm concerned with. And I may be the only one. I'm just going to stop there and let you guys discuss it.
Well, I would like to speak up, because I understand what you're saying, but when I'm reviewing these cases where I have a spay that bled out, I want to know what was done. How was it tied off? What was it tied off with? And it's hard for me to do a medical review when there's nothing that says OHA. And here, even in the shelter here, I have several veterinarians, and they have different ways of doing their spays. They're not all the same. And it's easy to write. If you do it the same way every time, you can have a script that you just copy and paste. It's not that big a deal. At least for us, it's not. I just say it's really makes it much harder for me to evaluate a case when I don't know what they did in the surgical procedure. They'll just say enterotomy, enclosure. You know, what does that mean? I mean, I know what enterotomy is. I'm not, but some of these things on the cases that I've been reviewing, they don't have any description of what they did. And then you have them die from peritonitis after they did an enterotomy. Well, how do I review that case and make a decision?
I think Dr. Skaggs's point is right on. You know, you don't need good records until you're in an IC. I mean, you need good records. You're right. You don't, Dr. Skaggs, until someone complains on you for the death of their dog, or, you know, and yes, there are complaints that get dismissed by medical review because they aren't a medical, you know, problem or whatever. But if a complainant complains about a standard of care, there are so many cases that we tell people, if all of what you just told us was in your record, you wouldn't have wasted the last 2 years of your life stressing over this process. And I'm sorry the process takes so long, but how many times have we said that to people in ICs? Like, geez, if the medical reviewer could have read all this in your records, it would be dismissed 2 years ago. So it's really a cover your ass. That's what we have to do. Excuse my language. Oh my gosh. It's really what we have to do nowadays, because it's not the board that's really changed much. It's your clients. It's our clients. So we have clients who are more educated. We have clients who, you know, speak out more possibly, and that's fine. But if we had a record that contained all of these things, like an exam before the dog like got hospitalized, and we knew how bad off it was ahead of time, you know.
My argument is not that, and certainly with Dr. White, I agree. On a surgical record, you at least need to kind of, on a major surgery, you need to know, hey, I did enterotomy, I did this. But on like a common everyday upper respiratory tract infection, you don't need to give a dissertation on what a cat's upper respiratory infection looks like, you know, and you don't necessarily need to go to such depth with that. And I think what to me is a little bit hypocritical is I look at my own records and I couldn't pass our guidelines, because it is impossible for you to do that on every single patient and make a living.
That's what your staff is for, to help you with.
I disagree, because if my staff does it and they leave something out, I'm still to blame. You know what I'm saying? If I say, okay, well, here's what we did, this and this and this, and they misspell a word or leave a word out, then it changes the whole deal of the sentence. It's just tough, because I understand where we're coming from, but also understand that if we're so dogmatic and think, okay, well, this is the way it should be done, but and again, I may or may not be doing all the things that are in there. It's just not fair for me to I don't know. It's just a tough situation.
And I think the other part of the patient record keeping that often goes undiscussed and it's very difficult, I know, that I've seen in ICs, and it comes down to a lot of the veterinarians that deal with cattle or horse herds or health certificates or flock situations, or our veterinarians that are dealing with wildlife and deer situations, is I think we probably need to discuss a little more in depth section C, and maybe help those veterinarians with what we're expecting in terms of a herd health exam, because there's been a lot of confusion, and I think it would help the investigators because they get very confused, because they think that, you know, if you're going out to look at a deer herd, you have to fill out like that kind of patient record, you know, on a deer or on a cow herd. And I think it's important that we make sure that we clarify that the herd records are not the same as, you know, Fluffy Smith or Susie Johnson. So I think we also need to look at the herd section maybe a little bit and address that at some point, so that it's easier for the investigators to understand when a veterinarian has done an appropriate herd assessment versus one individual patient. Because I see confusion on that in the ISDs as well.
My
You know,
suggestion, and I think since we've just kind of decided to do this rules committee, would be to send, get that rules committee together, let them spend some time, and it may take a month, it may take 6 months, and maybe kind of delve into some issues and look at it from a different perspective. But since we're going to have that committee anyway, I think we might as well take advantage of it by letting them do their job.
Yeah, I was kind of laughing when Dr. Mixon said that, tell what time the castration got off the ground. And I think in 26 years of practicing, I've never written the time that the animal got off the ground as I'm standing there waiting for it. So
no, and I've never done that either. I just gave it as an example that, if you have a horse on the ground, you're not going to have an anesthetic sheet, but you're not going to have a sheet where you recorded every breath and every heart rate. And you're not going to have a pulse ox on the horse's tongue. But I guess you could, like I was saying, you probably could record, what time you dropped it and what time you got it up. If you were looking for an anesthetic record, those are
right. But that's kind of hard to do when you're in the middle of the field with all your equipment there and you're leaving the paper back because it's windy.
Right.
The technician is actually scrubbing for you and someone's holding the leg up. So I think we need to put in some practicality, and which I think we try to do. So I know we read a lot of records that have a lot of stuff missing. But we also read a lot of records that we're like, yeah, I'd probably do that too, or I understand what they're doing. I think we need to sit down and maybe do this a line item at a time and discuss it. I don't know that I'd be prepared to agree on any changes right now without a long discussion.
Okay.
So the only time the board can have that discussion is here in public session. So if there's further discussion, or we go ahead and take all these rules, if that seems to be the trend, and send them to the rules committee that we, I guess, are going to form with one of these rules, and then bring them all back.
Does that sounds like the way it's leaning? Is that correct?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I mean, I looked at the third rule where most of it was struck out, and there was something that was missing. I wrote it down. I've got to look it up. But
Well,
if there's a rule.
More comments on Rule 577.5 first, so that the rules committee that we form will know where to go with it before we represent it.
I think that's something, especially since we have 3 members on the committee, just to ask the board to, if you're not serving on that committee, if there's anyone in particular you want reviewed, so that we can make the best time of that rules committee, send those to Brittany and John. And then maybe a little brief 2 sentences, what some concerns might be, so that we have that ability, or talk to one of the members. But I think we can really dive in and get some progression here that can be written in a manner that balances it out.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I agree with Dr. Skaggs and Dr. Kreiner too. We don't want to be overburdensome to the practicing veterinarian. I get that. I know when I was in private practice, solo practice, I agree. You don't have time to sit there and write all that stuff out, but you can copy and paste. So there are some things you can do if you do something the same way every time. But I do think it's a good idea for the rules committee to take into consideration that we don't want to be overburdensome to the veterinarian.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if that finishes commentary on that rule, we have one more, I think, that we didn't discuss yet, which is 573.75, which is duty to cooperate with the board amendment.
So I read through that and I did not necessarily disagree with that information. But I'm concerned because there's been several cases I've read through where the veterinarian did not have control, care, custody, or control of the records. So I know there's information missing that I would have liked to have had, but I can usually work around it. And by the time I get the case to read, or anyone else gets their cases to read, it's been 3 to 6 months, unless for some reason it's been fast tracked. And there might be missing an intake sheet, that intake sheet that some clinics have. Not every clinic has them. That might give you information about what the client actually came in for in their own words, or not that I care what other people charge in their practices, but you might just get the vet record, but you might be missing the invoice, and that invoice will sometimes tell you what they paid for, which is either less than or more than what was in the record. So in the bigger practices, in the corporate practices, the veterinarians don't always have the luxury of being able to get all that information, even though they've asked an office manager or medical director to send it. The other issue is you have people that do relief work, and once they're gone from that practice, they may not have access to those records either. So that duty to cooperate, where they're signing off on a sheet of paper that the board presents that says the records you send are complete and accurate, I think sets them up for another disciplinary action, if you were, because the records may not be 100% complete or accurate, which we're asking them to do.
Can
Well-
you add a sentence, Victoria, that says to the best of my ability?
No, the point of this rule is that medical reviewers, as well as IC people, are seeing cases that involve decisions based off of an x-ray or a lab work or a pathology report. And if we're truly reviewing these and we have not been sent complete records, whether by accident or because the veterinarian isn't doing this himself, him or herself, which I can't imagine. I mean, if I had a complaint against me, I personally would be tracking down every single thing from that patient and sending it in. We have, oh, my receptionist didn't send the right thing. Well, yeah, this delays processes further and further. The problem is we're not getting complete medical records in our cases. And then it's sitting longer because we have to go back and request more stuff when we realize we're missing something. And our medical reviewers may not even notice that they're missing something, and it comes to IC and we have major components of the case missing. This is kind of a wake-up call to veterinarians when someone complains against them to take it seriously, gather all your information. If I do relief work at a hospital and my name's on that record, I can go in there and get that record. But it's a matter of handling it myself and not expecting, the other hospital to submit my records for me. I'm going to go get those, and I'm going to make sure I have everything correct. I mean, make sure I have all the information that I need. And that is, if you're a veterinarian, your medical record, no matter where it's at, is your property.
And I have to add one thing. In this particular rule, so as the board, we are here to protect the public. Not the veterinarian. They've got the TVMA to protect the veterinarian. We are here to protect the public. And what I have found sitting on the ICs is that the public doesn't sometimes understand how to get their entire record. They're often not given their entire record, either intentionally or unintentionally. And so it's the board's obligation to make sure that we hold that veterinarian accountable to find out, to the best of our ability, given every investigative process that we have, what actually happened, especially if the animal died, was maimed, was injured. So Dr. Quillivan's point that the veterinarian, if there is a complaint filed, it's not a fun process, but that is the time when you have to gather every single piece of evidence and submit it. And there's nothing more frustrating to a medical reviewer or to somebody sitting at an IC to be lacking pertinent information at a critical juncture for either the veterinarian or for the animal owner. So I think it's important that veterinarians understand you must take this seriously.
Well, and I totally understand, because I've had several recently that I've had to deal with where it took an extra month to get everything that I needed for the case. But, you know, I just have a little bit of concern, and I know you take it seriously, but sometimes the information, even though it's available, is still not accessible. And that isn't the veterinarian's fault, such as an example is videos. You know, if the practice has videos, those need to be sent as proof of whatever the concern is within the record. But it's not the veterinarian's fault if the videos are corrupted or aren't working or take a month to get to work. And I don't know if we look at that as part of that consideration. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I am definitely, I know, being on the board as long as I've been on, that we are here to protect the public, which we remind veterinarians of all the time. But by that same token, we need to make sure that veterinarians that don't have all the access to everything they need aren't penalized.
Well, and I think one of our goals also way in the beginning, which we are just now getting to delve into, is rules and making them short and more concise and more clear and not so wordy. This is a much shorter rule, but also under item, 2B, the licensee is unable for good cause to meet the response date and request a different response date for the new date. This leaves you some room for those type of things, like Lynn, like you're saying. So they could even submit a signature form that says they have everything, except I'm hoping we can get these videos to you, or, whatever. I mean, that leaves the leeway there,
Right.
but
So
we
maybe we can
have
put an
a
exception in.
response, and we have to have, everything that they have access to. If it's something they don't
Right.
truly have access to, then that needs to be the discussion under B, as unable for good cause to meet that date. And that's up to, our investigative team, I guess, to make that decision.
And frankly, if under section B, we see a pattern of conduct coming out of corporations, if under section B, we see a pattern of conduct that is consistent on a high number of cases, that corporations are denying access to their veterinarians of these records, that's a thing we need to know under B. That needs to be stated under B, and we need to see that in writing from the veterinarian. That is important.
Yep.
Well,
Well, and I think too, this goes back to some of the education and the communications that we're doing. To me, especially if we're looking at changing rules, I want to know what's reasonable. I understand Dr. Skaggs's practice up in Perryton is completely different than one that's in Belton. And to some extent, it could help to, on a public transparency perspective, offer a video presentation for CLE that says, here's ICs 101. These are the things that we see. These are what we deal with. This is what our rules say. We need your, public feedback on what are some parameters in different parts of the state, different industries. Do we as vets want to require certain things when it comes to just general practice? So to make it easier and have that transparency, but I think to some extent that is, especially if we're diving into rules and we're diving into changes and different things, we've got to communicate this stuff and make sure that the industry understands what we go through and deal with in reviewing those things, but also we want to help and serve and we want to protect. So balancing that out and getting that input.
I really appreciate this board and the fact that we can, debate these issues and feel like we're at, it's very, very strongly opinionated, but still come together and create a very good outcome. Our esteemed colleague, Dr. Whitehead, appreciate her being here. And I think the comment that she made a few minutes ago about maybe allowing the rules committee to get together, maybe giving us an idea of, okay, here's what the rules committee is going to tackle first. Each board member then has their own time to look over those rules, offer a few suggestions, and send those in independently, and let that committee kind of come up with a, kind of a consensus and a good game plan. Might be an excellent way to go through all of these rules. The rules have been there for years and years, and we've been working with them. And I don't know that there's a necessity for us to get them all done today or tomorrow. We just want to make them right, or as close to right as we possibly can. And I wonder if that might not be a better process. And I appreciate Dr. Whitehead's insight into, maybe making that happen.
Thank you, sir. And I'll just add too, recently the state bar went under a very similar type process. I think there was 30 pages worth of edits to our ethics procedures. And it's taken a couple years, but man, those changes are fabulous and decades needed of changes and updates and stuff. So it's going to be some hard work, but I appreciate this board's openness and willingness to talk about these things and really dive in.
Mhm.
And just so you know, Ms. Whitehead, this is one of the main reasons I actually joined the board, was to consolidate rules, make them more concise, make them more understandable to stakeholders. And because of the extreme burden on the board due to the disruption in the board 3 or 4 years ago, this is really the first year I've been on the board that we've been able to tackle the rules. I think Dr. Quillivan and Dr. Kreiner would agree with me. This is the first time we've been able to tackle the rules since I was on the board, because we've been so overwhelmed with medical cases and trying to get the board back up to a functioning level. So it's a critical function of the board, I think, to take the rules and make this make the committee function as soon as possible.
Mhm.
Well, why don't we just go ahead and we already voted on the rules committee, correct? So that, and maybe what we can do is list the rules that we would like to review, and every board member that is not on the committee can go through that rule, look at what the changes they want to make, present those to Brittany, who can then forward that to the rules committee to evaluate. So the rules committee can make their changes that they want and then review the other changes that the other members have suggested, and then come back and represent them.
That's fine if we have a commitment that you guys are all going to look at your TBVME email on a regular basis, or else we're not going to get jack done.
Yes,
I
know. No, Dr. Quillivan's right. One of the reasons it's taken so long is that once we have,
that's what you're going to get. But
as soon as the committee's in place, basically, once everyone decides, okay, these are the rules we want the committee to look at, then I think there ought to be a time limit that basically every board member has 14 days or 21 days to submit their major concerns with that rule, so that the rules committee has 2 months to formulate and put everything together. Because you're right, you can't send a change you want 24 hours before the next board meeting. It's too late.
Yeah.
I think that's a good plan moving forward, because that's something we can now concentrate on now that we've pretty much gotten everything else under control with this board. And that way nothing is rushed and everything can be thoughtful and everyone can be on the same page.
Mhm.
So, Dr. Turner, I have to disagree. I'm not sure we got Dr. White under control. See him right there? He does not look under control.
I heard a couple different timelines, but I just want to make sure end of session, summer coming up, different things. But more realistically, this is going to be more than 2 months to dive in and get everybody together.
No, that's not what we're saying. That's not
okay. Sorry, I was like, wait, what?
What I said was between board meetings in general, we have about 3 months. So once once we're in a board meeting, everyone says, these are 3 rules we'd like to be looked at. Then everybody who wants to comment outside of the rules committee needs to send them to Brittany within 21 days. So the rules
Yeah.
committee has 2 months to formulate all that and put it together before the next board meeting.
Okay.
Does that make
On the
sense?
same page.
Okay.
Yes.
14 days is probably plenty too, instead of
Thank you.
21.
Thank you,
Oh,
Dr.
maybe-
Skaggs. Thank you,
We're too
Dr.
busy.
Dr. White, you do look out of control, but that's neither here nor there.
You know,
It
since
doesn't.
I'm growing my own face covering.
Okay, so Brittany, we need to pass the rules committee amendment today. So Brittany, do you want to present that? And are there any questions of the board on the rules committee, and who would like to volunteer to be on the rules committee then?
So per my notes, we voted on that provision. Mr. Purdue and Dr. White provided the motion and the second to
Awesome.
the rules committee.
Okay.
We can continue in the ad hoc fashion because all we'll be doing
Just
today
posting that. Yep.
is posting and proposing it for then adoption at the following board meeting. So if you all want to keep working and having these conversations, we can just keep the ad hoc committee in place until we can formally adopt the rule and institute the committee, hopefully at the next board meeting.
Okay. All right, very good. Any other questions or concerns?
So did we establish which rules we want to look at?
Well, we still have these 3 pending. We have license surrender rule, we have veterinary patient record keeping, and we have duty cooperate with the board. So those are the 3 we're still going to be working on.
Okay, well, that will take some time, so.
Would you like to add another?
I'd like to add one to this one because it's related to, I think it affects everybody. And so I think it needs a little modification or adjustment. And that would be the labeling and medications rule.
Tell me the
And,
number of the rule.
I'm sorry.
The number of the rule. What
Let
rule
me
is it?
see real quick. That would be. Oh, that's-
Dr. White, did you have one as well that you're interested in?
No,
All right, hold on. I'll get that rule number for you in just a second. That would be 573.40.
Got it. So Brittany,
And
in
um,
terms of streamlining the process and going forward and working on these rules and adding the labeling, can the ad hoc committee, is that still me and Dr. Quillivan? Can we ask every board member to submit their issue, like at the rules that we're currently working on? Can they submit those to you? And even though we're still ad hoc, can we do that process? Like Dr. Skaggs was saying, can we start that process now?
Absolutely, because anything that you are acting as members of the board and proposing to the board, the board would still have to fully vote and adopt it in a public meeting. So there's no provision against you all continuing to operate until we can get this rule adopted.
Okay, great.
so we have 4 rules now. Okay,
Dr. Crowner, your rule was regarding labeling. And that, is that like, there's one rule that I was a little bit concerned about, like treating some of our new adoptive kennels, rescues operations more like large animal facilities, as well as our horse barns.
yeah,
Treating them more like large animal facilities to where you don't have to have independent labels for each individual animals. You kind of prevent a herd health guideline for those.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at because it's being done anyway. So why don't we I want to adjust the rule because it's being done anyway. So that, it's clear that there is no violation. Because if you've got, and I can come up with several examples, if you have someone who's a breeder and they're your regular client, I'm not talking about people that aren't your clients, you already know these people, and they have, 2 2 or 3 litters that are born, and one is a litter of 6 to 8 puppies, and they all have diarrhea, every single one of them. And they bring you 2 of the sickest puppies. You're going to give them medication for those 2 puppies, and then they're going to use that medication for the rest of the puppies that are in that litter. And for horses, if you like I do this, I know you do this, I'm pretty sure Mixon does this, you might have a barn with 10, 15, 20 horses, and they need bute because half of them are crippled lesson horses. And, you're going to sell them several containers so that they can use them appropriately on the lesson horses on a daily basis. And so if you have to write a label for every horse, are you going to sell them a container for 20 horses? Or are you going to sell them 6 containers or 2 containers that they can use on all the horses till they need another container? Or you leave Banamine because they're across town from you and they're going to let you know that they've got a sick horse, but you're still 6 hours away. They need to be able to give them something. So I just want to be able to, know that what I'm doing, what I know you're doing, what I know Dr. Mixon is doing, and what I know I've seen in clinics everywhere, that our labeling matches what we're currently doing. It's not necessarily not putting a label on, but instead of the person that has 2 dogs in the house or 2 cats in the house or owns 1 horse, they have care, custody, and control of a large number of animals in basically a herd-like situation, even though horses, dogs, and cats cannot technically be referred to as a herd.
I think that's a great idea. And it's kind of in my mind, it's something that is probably evolved through the years and is a little different than it was when I first got out of school. We've got all these rescue operations that we're dealing with and trying to help. It just makes it a lot better game plan. And I agree. I think it's something we need to address to prevent anybody from worrying about being penalized for it.
I agree.
Okay, so Rules Committee amendment, Brittany. So where are we on that? That's already been, we're posting that now, or we have to post that first and then we can.
So yes, today the board elected to propose that rule. So we'll post it on the register, gather public comment, and then come back at the next board meeting and hopefully adopt.
Excellent.
Okay. Any other discussion on item number 4? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 5, discussion regarding LVT duties and scope of practice. As some of you may know, for the second time, I've worked this last semester at the local college that has an LVT program and get to discuss with them and the students a lot of things that go on. Of course, I'm also on a committee for AAVSB that has their own kind of recommendations and recommendations to boards as far as what other states are doing and things like that. So LVTs have been hot in my mind. In my own practice, I used them quite regularly, and I kind of wonder if LVTs can help us a lot thinking about the rural practice. And it seems counterintuitive because I know that rural practitioners might seem to be the last one to want to pay for an LVT wage, but I have learned that in some states, LVTs are doing lots of stuff with large animal herds that already have a VCPR with the veterinarian and things like that. And I wonder if that would help our rural practitioners if we had to list a different scope of practice. I'll just share a couple of examples. In some states, there are no specific tasks given to their licensed veterinarians. It is still up to the DVM's discretion, which to me means they can do, and in some states they'll specify LVTs can do anything that the DVM feels they are capable of doing with their knowledge, except the things we know that only DVMs can do, which is exam, diagnose, prognose, initiate treatment unless it's an emergency, and surgery, I think are the things that our rule states, and most states have that same rule. So it gives a lot of leeway in some states for a DVM to give tasks to an LVT that might save them a lot of time, and especially single or 2-doctor practice. Instead of hiring another DVM, they could hire a couple of LVTs who might be able to help the practice in a lot of ways. In Illinois, it's interesting. Registered or licensed veterinary technicians are allowed to, with a already established DVM, client-patient relationship, dehorning of calves, docking sheep, pigs, and tails, doing euthanasias, and things like that. So I'm just looking for any discussion or comments, or if anyone's had an experience that they think they could use an LVT for and are not being utilized already, the use of our paraprofessional staff.
Sue Ellen, I think this is a job for you.
Who, Sue Ellen? Yeah.
Sue Ellen, yeah, it's a job for you to comment.
Yeah, I was trying to look back in my email and look at the AAVSB because that was shared with me. For techs, we've long talked about more utilization, especially in rural practices. And I think it's been somewhat understood that maybe broadening that scope of what we do would benefit the rural practitioner. They could, on some level, stay in the clinic and do those exams and do those surgeries. And we could go out and help with herd health work, not crossing over the line with federal regulation herd health work, because we can't change those rules. But I know a practitioner who his LVT goes out and does his follow-ups, bandage changes, and checking things, and with telecommunication and sending visuals and videos and stuff, saves them time from having to go to that clinic or going to that client. They can go on and do something else. So I think there's value in that. Not to take away from lay people, because they've been very valuable. They are very valuable, but there would be some things that would have to, I think, be an LVT specifically designated to do those things. Looking over, that's always been a little bit of a challenge with being an LVT is, well, the non-licensed can do X, Y, and Z. So what's the difference in what we can do? But maybe helping specify some of those things. And if, and I don't know, I mean, Dr. Skaggs, you definitely are in a rural area, looking at how would it benefit practices that are in those more rural areas to have somebody that can go do some of those things, or even on site do some of those things.
It's a little shocking to me that LVTs, the degree of underutilization that they have. They go to college, they learn this stuff, and then you get out in the real world and you've got somebody that I've hired and has worked for me for 6 months, and they technically can't do a whole lot more, under the law than the guy that just hired. And they should be rewarded for their education. And I think you're right. I think it's time that we kind of specify and broaden their ability to do some of these jobs.
Yeah, and I'm the last one to take away from those non-formally trained people, but that's a huge conversation amongst even students like Dr. Corbin's talking about, like, well, it doesn't matter in the practice because they don't know what I do. They don't care what I know, and I know that I was recently told there's a program director in another vet tech program that's been is now going to be on and forgive me, I can't think of the name of the National Association, but to work with new graduate vets in helping them identify technicians and utilization and what we are trained to do, because I think that is not very well identified. You know, just weird example. Some years ago, we were at A&M on a tour with the program, and we were in the equine department, and they were all fourth-year vet students in there watching what we were watching. And one of them said, "Where are you guys from?" And I told him, you know, we're a vet tech program. And he goes, "Yeah, I think I've worked with some of those here, but I really don't think I'll need one when I get out and practice." And I almost went, "Oh, give yourself some time. Hopefully you'll change your mind." But, you know, I think it's going to have to start on a lot of different levels, and maybe, you know, because not all vet schools mandate credentialed technicians in their hospitals either. So, and those interns don't necessarily know who they're working with in those different departments, but it would be nice to help us develop a more defined scope of practice and maybe a broader scope of practice. I've never met a tech who's legit and licensed that wants to take over and do what vets do. You know, we know there's a very big distinction. I don't want to compromise my license by stepping over that line, but my job is to make that vet's job easier, and let them do what they're supposed to be doing and can generate money, and let me do what I can do and generate money for that practice. But, you know, having a better defined scope of practice would be something I would love to see.
You
I
know,
really would like to see that too. I know where Dr. Quillivan's working now, that the techs that come out of that program are very well educated. And
Yes, they are.
I would love to see them be able to do more things, make it easier on the veterinarian. Even, you know, it would probably get them higher wages, would still save the veterinarian money from having to hire another veterinarian. And with the veterinary shortages nowadays, we need to make use of LVTs.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage our
to-
students. I said, you know, I'm not above cleaning a cage and scooping poop. I've been a tech 40 years this month, and I'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. But, you know, I can draw that blood. I can do that lab work the doctor orders. I can do that imaging. I can prep those patients for surgery. You know, while that doctor's doing things that contribute and generate money for that practice and hopefully make their life easier, you know, at the end of the day.
So
But it is.
if you look at
education too. It's not
doctors-
just throwing those rules out there. It's like, you know, and when you get out of tech school, you have the basics and you're not necessarily proficient in everything. You build those skills. I mean, just kind of like vets when they get out, they're skilled, but they're building those skills with time and experience. And some people are better at some areas than others, but you know, I got well utilized as a tech in practice. Maybe not to the degree I could have, but I did a lot as a tech. And one vet told me, he said, "You kept me from hiring an associate because of what you can do. I don't have to hire an associate because you can do X, Y, and Z for me." You know, so that was a benefit for them.
So one of the things we can look at is what goes on in a lot of the doctors' practices where they have PAs, where there might be one doctor and they have 4 or 5 PAs in there, and you may never see the doctor. And you can go in and have a full exam just as if you saw a doctor and it was their physician's assistant. And they don't have a medical degree and they have the same amount of training as an LVT, which is 2 years, isn't it? It's a 2-year program. So it's the same amount of training, just in a different, you know, in our sister field of medicine. And we can see the things that they do that we can look at. But our rules state that, you know, we have to have a VCPR.
Yep.
So if we're following that path and we're trying to open up the industry for LVTs, not assistants, but licensed vet techs, then we could look at maybe offering that pattern or some part of that pattern, such as animals that come in for a well exam for vaccines, you know, your 6 week, 9 week, 12 week vaccines or once a year, whatever, where the LVT could do the exam the way a PA would do an exam, and then the veterinarian could review it before they leave the clinic. I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but that seems to where this discussion is going for the LVTs. And if I had an LVT working for me, and that's probably not likely going to happen anytime soon, in an ambulatory equine practice, I would feel very uncomfortable letting them go out and euthanize a horse for me while I did something else on the other side of town. That's just not something. And I know euthanasia came up because you'll do it in small animals where, you know, the LVT and everyone may set something up to euthanize the animal and the vet's in the room and they say, go ahead and euthanize it. Or the vet is on the other side of the room doing surgery and he says, go ahead and euthanize it. So, you know, I personally am not comfortable with letting anyone getting into my controlled drugs, but I know it's done in practices, especially small animal across the state, where the staff, whether LVT or not, has access to the drug box to get everything ready for the DVM. So
in my mind, I think it's more of a, instead of a, you know, physician's assistant, it'd be more like an RN sort of situation. And, you know, I think our next step might be a good idea to kind of mimic some of the, or collect some of the things that are allowed by those in other states that are a little bit maybe more advanced in the state of Texas, and let us just kind of look over those and have an idea about what we like, what we don't like, and then formulate our discussion going forward depending on what, you know, what's out there.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would like to say that it is true that a physician assistant's education is about 26 months. However, that is typically after a bachelor's degree. So it's really a 6-year commitment in most PAs. And yes, I do think we need to look at all that.
Well, there are organizations who have done this, and I, as a veterinarian, y'all know that I think veterinarians are way better than human physicians. And sorry that I'm going to say that in public, but I don't want to compare ourselves at all to that side of the track. I don't know. My father's been in the hospital recently and I'm very underwhelmed by the care that he's receiving. So I don't even want to go there. But yes, there are agencies like AAVSB and NAVTA and lots of other national associations who kind of do this occasionally and compare and poll veterinarians and poll LVTs. So I just wanted to bring it up for discussion. It sounds like we're interested in maybe looking at that as well and finding a way to better utilize our LVTs and make them more valuable. A lot of points were brought up, which I think is the cause of me bringing this up, is a shortage of DVMs. Mm-hmm. Can we leverage our LVTs better to help the rural practitioner who can't hire another DVM because none of the ones coming out of school want to go out there? And I know we're also working on all these incentive programs continually, but you know, how do we solve some of this problem? And I agree that, you know, an LVT coming right out of LVT school is not ready to go do stuff on their own. It takes mentorship, but I wasn't ready to go. You know, I went to a practice where there were other veterinarians when I first got out of school. I would have never opened my own practice straight out of school. There's this learning curve, you know, 2 to 5 years out of school. But after that, you know, a lot of LVTs are super, super capable at doing lots of stuff. And ultimately it comes down to the DVM's comfort level with them and giving them more duties, of course. But okay, I just wanted to bring that up for discussion. I appreciate all the thoughts, and maybe that's a direction, you know, to look further into. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, doctors, for being open to that. And Dr. Kreiner, personally, I don't, even as a tech, I don't know that I would be comfortable euthanizing a horse without that doctor there versus in a clinic situation. But I think there are some things that we need to look at moving forward to that we can identify, like Dr. Pullman said, look at the AVSB, look at other states and see what works and doesn't work for them and see what we come up with for Texas.
Thank you. Okay, no further discussion on item 5. Let's move on to item number 6. Discussion regarding temporary suspension process. Ms. Sharkey.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. So for many on the board, if you do not sit on our executive disciplinary panel, you are not probably as familiar with our temporary suspension process, but several of the orders that you do see and approve in these board meetings come to us from that process. So I thought it would be nice just to give you all a little bit of walkthrough, and then potentially ask some questions, and we can discuss the process in a little bit more detail. So the way that a case is flagged for a possible temporary suspension starts with the enforcement team. They will draft up a request for temporary suspension if they see something that to them they feel poses an immediate risk or threat of harm to the public. I review that case, I discuss it with John and ask for approval to request a temporary suspension. We then call a no notice hearing with the executive disciplinary committee, which is Dr. Quillivan, Dr. Kreiner, and Mr. Purdue. We have a brief phone call where they review the records. If the panel at that time, based on the information we have, feel that the licensee in question poses a risk or threat of immediate harm to the public, they will at that time vote to temporarily suspend the license of that license holder. We will then draft an order reflecting what our information has revealed, send that to the licensee, notify them that their license has been temporarily suspended. And then within 14 days, we will hold a subsequent hearing in the same style as an informal conference to vet those claims and discuss what's going on with that licensee. Depending on the circumstances, the panel can that day at the 14-day hearing either vote to lift or continue the suspension, and they can also at that point make a recommendation for final disciplinary action if they feel they have enough information at that time to do so. And so that's how we get to several of these orders that you all have seen and reviewed, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions? We will move on to item number 7, consideration and approval of agreed orders. Ms. Sharkey.
Are there any cases from this list that any member would like to pull for discussion in executive session? I have CP 18336 that was submitted prior to the meeting, CP 18081, and DK 2017123 as requested to be pulled for discussion in executive session. Are there any others? Okay. All right. And then we will need Dr. Quillivan, then we'll have to ask for a motion to approve the remainder. You go ahead and approve the remainder of the agreed orders not being.
I have a motion for the remainder of the agreed orders in item 7.
So moved.
Second.
Both of y'all moved and seconded. Okay, one or the other. Okay, we got it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 8, consideration and approval of cases recommended for dismissal by medical review.
Okay. Submitted to me prior to the meeting was CP 20297 for discussion in executive session. Are there any other cases any member wishes to discuss from this section?
Okay, beyond the pulled case, can I get a motion to approve item number 8?
Move.
Bless you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Agenda item 9, consideration and approval of cases recommended for dismissal from informal conference.
And prior to the meeting, I have requested to have CP 18330 and CP 19243 pulled for discussion in executive session.
Are there any other you would like to pull? Can I get a motion to approve item number 9 without the 2 cases pulled?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Agenda item number 10, consideration and approval of cases recommended for dismissal by staff.
There were no cases submitted to me in this category prior to the meeting for executive session.
Sorry, I have a few to pull. Can we pull CP 20367?
CP 20367. Yes.
CP 21049
Okay.
and CP 21069, please.
Okay. Okay.
So barring those three cases, can I get a motion to approve item number 10?
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. And item number 11, consideration and approval of cease and desist letters.
I have no cases pulled, recommended to be pulled for executive session.
May I get a motion to approve item 11?
Approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay. Item number 12 is citizen comments. I believe we have a couple, so I don't know how we bring them in or what happens now. Are they in the waiting room?
We will bring them in, but we're on a YouTube delay for a few minutes. So I would say if you want to call a quick recess to allow them time to come into the waiting room.
Okay, brief bio break, return in 5 or 10.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Quillivan, we still don't have anybody in there. We're making telephone contact with them right now.
Okay.
Dr. Quillivan,
Yes,
how are things going over at Tomball?
they're good. We're finished with the semester actually, so I haven't been back in a while. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you guys working on our animals because it's a benefit for us as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really fun. It works out really well. I think some of them get adopted from students there too.
Yeah, yeah, they do.
Hard not to. That Eli dog, did he get adopted or is he with y'all still? That one I did is kind of made a little ectropion instead of entropion, but oh well, that's better for him than entropion.
Yeah, I'll have to check on that one. I don't know if he's still here or not. Eli?
Yeah, that big old dog with the giant lump on his back and the eye problems and all the different things we did besides neuter him.
Well, Dr. Quillen, you never make judgments on those entropions if you've made extropions for about another 6 months, because a lot of scarring can happen and it'll get right back to normal. So don't sell yourself short yet.
Well, yeah, I know. And I hate to not take enough and then have to repeat a surgery. And
Yeah, no, it'll be fine. Give it 6 months.
I know. Yeah. He had severe entropion, like kind of the lateral resection too, and the whole under eyelid. But
There's nothing better than fixing those, is there? You just
and
like relief yourself.
Yep. And them,
great.
they're like, oh, I can see. And
Yeah,
I can't
it
bother.
doesn't hurt.
Yeah, they're so happy. Yeah. Love those.
My favorite surgery is medial luxating patella.
Really?
Love
Easy?
those.
Easy
I don't know.
peasy?
What?
Are they easy peasy? I never mess with any orthopedic things. So I'm like,
Yeah, I think they're so easy. Even if you have to move the tibial crest over a little bit, and then I don't know,
wow, I'm impressed.
My favorite.
Good.
I'm trying to figure out, I've got a bunch of old stuff from plating stuff from practice, and I've got a femoral fracture here that I'm trying to see if I have enough stuff to put a plate on it.
Nice.
I'm
Good
struggling.
deal.
Well, if you don't yell at me, I'll see what I got I can send you.
Okay.
Nice.
We're trying to do more and more stuff here at the shelter. More, not just wellness stuff. We're really trying to do. I
Some
want to
of
get
these
into
dogs
orthopedic.
fixed up. Yeah. Nice. Good.
I bet I know that used to work in shelter medicine said they end up three-legged or missing an eye, they get adopted pretty quick because they're special.
Yep. That's true.
They're just different looking. Yep.
It is, unfortunately, it is. Well, fortunately, it is true.
Yeah.
Fortunately, because that's a lot what you see, Dr. White, isn't it?
Mhm.
The ones nobody wants anymore.
Yep.
Sad.
Okay, I'll quit talking.
Oh, I like it.
All right, Dr. Quillivan, we've left messages for them both, and we have nobody in the waiting room. So
Oh, boy. Okay. So you've them?
yeah, I mean, if you want to move on, if they come into the waiting room, we can recall number 12, but nobody at the moment.
Okay, we're back live, I guess. So, all right, so we will hold off, and if they pop in, we will go back to item 12. Item 13, discussion of possible agenda items and dates for future board meetings. I think we have developed a lot of agenda items at this point, so that's good. I've written them down, I think. So we have some topics. Dates, what are we looking at here?
Sometime early September would be good for us, first part of September.
Is this our last board meeting for the,
Fiscal year, don't we have in October? Oh, that's after.
don't we have we do 4 a year, right?
We didn't.
So
Yeah,
this
you're required
is this
to.
the third one?
You're required to do 2 a year. Last year we did 2, and so you can do as many as you would like, but you have to do by our rules 2.
Okay, because normally don't we do one like right before the end of this year? It's just a question. Didn't we do one?
Well, COVID
We usually
probably.
do
threw
one
us
like
off the
July and then
last year.
August, September, October. We did one in October, and then we usually do one 3 months before that, even if it's short, just to get rid of some of our, cases.
Cases.
I think
Do one
that
in August, or do we have too much going on then?
the case management, but then also with the goals of doing the rules review, it'd be nice to have a couple back, maybe two or two-ish in the fall. I mean, 2 to 3 might help us really
Sure,
knock
so-
some of that out.
Yeah, so what we did in 2019 is we did January, April, July, and October. And then last year, we did January and September. And this year, we've done, obviously, February and May. So, but you're not held to anything. You can do whatever you would like.
I think we should do August. And then the reason we do one in October is because the holidays come, the end of the year. We're not going to usually find November, December open for anybody to get together often. So we've done 2 this is our 3rd this fiscal year. So we could theoretically do an August date if anyone and staff is agreeable to that. And then we would plan on, it would be short if we do beginning of August and end of October, maybe that's almost a 3-month span so that we're actually covering some ground in between meetings, maybe. I don't know. Anyone?
Will
Yeah.
August still be Zoom? I'm asking because in August, I'm literally like not here. I have 2 major horse competitions that I have to do with my daughter, so I won't be in the state of Texas in August, but I can do it.
Even if some did want to go into the office, if that was an option, we can still accept. I mean, yeah, I think because we're still under that emergency thing, we can still do it as we want, right, John and Brittany? Yes, okay.
Yeah, and that'll help us, even if we don't do a whole lot, and even if you don't feel like you're ready with some of the rules that we are discussing right now, we could at least dispense
Clear
with some
cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be like a quick 9 to noon meeting and we're done or something.
Because we have several ICs between now and then. So I agree. I think we should have one. So I would think it would be best, like ideally the beginning of August. And then when we look at our October, kind of the end of October to try to stretch that time frame out too.
I would second that, especially someone who's going to be involved in that process. And I'm expecting a child mid-September, so that'll kind of
September is out, end of October. Well,
so early August would be great. Late October would be great.
Well, we haven't seen that. You need to stand up so we can see that.
how exciting. She doesn't have a bump. Actually, she probably does. She's so little and dainty.
I hardly have one, but I could definitely make early August and late October work and still be involved in that process.
Okay, for all you working people, early August, what does that look like? And do we like this day of the week, or what's everyone wanting to do?
First week in August, right now, any day works for me.
Sorry, the only day I have is the 3rd. That's my birthday too. It's my birthday.
Oh,
Yay, then we need to do it on your
Yeah,
birthday.
it's my birthday on the 3rd. So that's the
you
only
don't
day.
want to do that on your birthday, do you?
Oh, really? I'm going to be 53. It's kind of irrelevant. So
Oh, you're still a baby.
it's literally, that's the only day I have available in the early August.
Well, I mean, do you want to look at the next week? I mean, the first 2 weeks is acceptable, or is that getting into horse show? Nope. Okay, August 3rd.
August 3rd is the only Tuesday I've got in August.
Anyone? Well, it doesn't have to be Tuesday.
We're currently meeting on a Thursday.
That's literally the only day I have before I start driving to Michigan, Ohio, Chicago.
Good Lord. Okay. Well,
Going
August
to the
3rd.
finals, are you?
No, she made 2 final competitions, so we got to go to both. So
Nice.
Nice. Congratulations. Okay. We're pinning in August 3rd. Let's look at October. Let's look ahead.
October, you can do whatever you want.
The last week in October, if we were to keep it on a Tuesday, would be October 26th.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with it.
That works.
October 26th. I should,
Potentially.
October. Still looking. Yeah, that should be okay. Tuesday, October 26th.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The only thing, that is a commissioner's court meeting
Oh,
date.
okay.
And I don't usually have to go to those unless somebody's complaining about us, then I have to go.
Well, that's always a possibility. Isn't it? Do we want to do not?
Well, you could do
Tuesday?
2 computers at a time and just put one in.
Oh, Lord, no. Do we want to do Wednesday, October 27th? Anyone?
I can't do Wednesdays.
how about Thursday? The
I can do
28th.
Thursday.
Okay, just for safety, let's try to change it to the 28th, Thursday.
Yeah, I'm
All
good.
right. I'm good.
This way it'll assure that you're not needed on Tuesday, Dr. White. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Spoken like a veterinarian.
Okay, and I think, like I said, I think we came up with a lot of agenda items, but as usual, if any come into your head, we have lots of time to add them to the next agenda. So you guys are free at any time to bring items to my attention that you would like added. I keep a list between every board meeting, so we can make lists. Okay,
Dr. Quinn,
Yes.
our internet kind of cut off. What was your date in October?
28, 10/28, it's a Thursday of that same week.
Okay, and what time are these all starting?
9 a.m. works for me.
Yep.
Any other questions? Are we finished with that? We got what we need out of that?
Yes, ma'am. John's still working on his audio. He can hear, though. We do have a public commenter in the waiting room.
Awesome. Okay. Do we want to bring those in, him or her in now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, great. Miss Evans, are you there? Can you hear us? There you are. You're on mute.
There you go. Sorry. Hi. So my name is Courtney Evans, recently married, so it's now Courtney here. I'm the current president of the Veterinary Team Association of Texas, or VTAT. So VTAT is the state association for all veterinary professionals, formerly known as TARVET. Our membership includes.
Evans, are you
Yes.
there? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Can you hear my audio?
Yes,
Yes.
I can. Can everyone else hear?
No. Can y'all? Okay, I'm off of mute. Can y'all hear me now?
So my name is Courtney Evans, recently married, that's now Courtney here.
Oh, we have a delay or something.
It sounds like your YouTube is still playing. If you want to mute that, that might help.
It's muted now. Can y'all hear me?
Probably.
Okay, try. Can
Sorry,
everyone hear
can y'all-
Courtney? I can.
Okay, can y'all hear me now? Is that
Yes.
okay? Sorry. All right. So my name is Courtney Evans. I'm the current president for the Veterinary Team Association of Texas, or VTAT. VTAT is a state association for all veterinary professionals, formerly known as TARVET. Our membership includes LVTs, CDAs, veterinary assistants, practice managers, and other professionals in the veterinary profession throughout Texas. I'm here representing the membership of VTAT to encourage and fully support the board to continue discussion and to work with the LVT Advisory Committee to establish board rules to expand the licensed veterinary technician scope of practice. LVTs must work under the supervision of a veterinarian, but by allowing a veterinarian to better leverage individuals who are licensed by this board, it will enhance and improve veterinary medicine for all involved. all aspects of veterinary medicine, not limited to food animal, equine, companion animal, shelter medicine, and telehealth can use some assistance, especially in rural areas where veterinarians are limited both numerically and economically. But by better leveraging licensed professionals who will still be required to work under the umbrella of a veterinarian with patients that have a valid doctor-client-patient relation, it just makes sense and helps protect the public by better providing access to veterinary medicine to all parts of Texas. Myself and VTAT's members, we look forward to continuing this discussion and providing feedback to the board members and the LVT Advisory Committee to possibly develop board rules for an enhanced scope of practice for LVTs. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Did our other public commenter ever join or show up in the room? Brittany or Patricia?
It's Mr. Sessoms, and he's calling Patricia right now, so we can,
Okay.
and I'll let you know when he's in. Dr. Quillen, if you want to
Well, our only next step is executive session. So if he's close to getting in, I think we should try to get our commenters in and out and then, but are we close? They're talking.
He came back in the room. It wasn't him, so he's not here.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we will proceed with item number 14. We will go into executive session to discuss pending and contemplated litigation and personnel matters. The time is 11:11 a.m. Do I need a motion for that, Brittany, or? I don't think.
No, let me confirm with how we're going to handle this. Technically, I think the last time we went into a breakout room.
Okay.
Let me just confirm that.
I'm invited to join June room 1. Let's go. Okay, pending that everyone's back, it is 11:48 and we have finished our executive session. No decisions were made in executive session. We now will go back and vote on all the cases that were pulled. Brittany?
All right, we will start with the agreed order pulled cases. We'll start with case CP 18081. All those in favor of approving the agreed order?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Right. Next up, we have the agreed order case CP 18336. All in favor of approving that order?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That order is approved. Finally, from this category, we have DK 2017123. All those in favor of approving the order?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Right, that order is approved. And we'll move on to the medical review dismissal cases. The case for consideration is CP 20297. All those in favor of approving the dismissal?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. The next category will be dismissals from informal conference. The first case for consideration is CP 18330. All those in favor of approving the dismissal?
Aye.
Any opposed? The next case in this category is CP 19243. All those in favor of approving the dismissal of this case?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Right, and the final category is dismissals based on staff recommendations. The first case for consideration is CP 20367. All those in favor of dismissing CP 20367?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. The dismissal is approved. The next case in this category is CP 21049. All those in favor of approving the dismissal of this case?
Aye.
And all those opposed?
Nay.
Aye.
Okay.
Gonna have to have a count somehow.
Right. So sorry, on the opposed, I have Dr. Skaggs, Dr. Quillivan. Who else am I missing?
Dr. White.
Is that the one that we wanted pulled? Is that the one?
It's not being pulled for IC, it's being pulled for.
Medical review.
Medical
Oh,
review.
Yeah.
Yes.
So pull
Okay,
it
we
for
need-
review, yeah. It
Yeah,
doesn't,
pull for medical review. Yeah.
yeah.
Wait, so we're voting to pull it for medical review, correct?
Right.
Correct.
So you would either approve the dismissal or not approve the dismissal.
Ah.
So that's,
I'd
So
like
he-
to move to reconsider the vote.
yes.
Thank you. Seconded.
Second, okay. Let us go back. Okay, so the case at hand is CP 21049. All those in favor of approving the dismissal of the case, say aye. All those opposed to the dismissal of this case.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
All right. Perfect. CP 21049 is pulled and will be referred to a medical review. Next up is case CP 21069. All those in favor of dismissal.
Aye.
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 Those opposed.
Aye.
All right. Case CP 21069 is dismissed. All right, that concludes our cases pulled for executive session, Dr. Quillivan.
Thank you. I think that means it's 11:52 and I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Business? Hold on, I'm still talking. Don't make the motion that quickly. Jeez. Okay, no, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. Okay, would you like to make a motion, Dr. Mixon?
Can we motion to adjourn? I motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Or any opposed? It's crickets, crickets. Okay. Thank y'all for a very productive meeting, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Brittany and
Great.
Patricia.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.